SBS advises that the following program has been classified M. It contains adult themes.
In 1996, this woman came forward to tell the Belgian authorities she'd spent her childhood years as the victim of a paedophile network. She described a world of organised sexual abuse, torture and even murder.
It was terrible. You didn't believe your eyes. And I didn't believe that humans could do that.
She talked of violent child sex orgies with politicians, judges and influential businessmen, a Belgian underworld in which the establishment has refused to believe.
Regina Louf est une mythomane, c'est mon avis. C'est une dame qui a inventé, je dirais, des scénarios qui ne tiennent pas la route.
A campaign followed to discredit her evidence, but now in an exclusive interview, the policeman assigned to investigate her claims has broken his silence. He says the inquiry was blocked because it threatened to reveal too much.
I'm convinced that she has been a victim, that's for sure.
In June 1996, this Belgian slum revealed a bitter secret that would come to haunt the nation. The eyes of the world watched in horror. Into the light emerged two young girls. Laetitia, aged 14, and Sabine, just 12, were the latest in a long line of girls who'd gone missing. Marc Dutroux, a convicted rapist and kidnapper, had led the police to where he'd imprisoned them. Relief swept Belgium as their tearful homecoming was caught on camera. But it soon turned to horror when police revealed the secret cage hidden in the cellar of Dutroux's house. The girls had been kept here, drugged and repeatedly raped. But what of Belgium's other missing children? 8-year-olds Julie and Melissa, who were missing for more than a year, and 12 others who'd vanished mysteriously. Was this a new lead in the hunt for them? The hopes of their parents were soon dashed. Within days, Marc Dutroux led police to the site where the bodies of Julie Lejeune and Melissa Rousseau were buried. The parents were informed, but when the Rousseaus asked to see their daughter, Melissa, for the last time, they were refused.
On a demandé, on a pleuré pour pouvoir les voir. Oui, vraiment, on a insisté avec notre avocat, on a vraiment pleuré. Et on nous a dit non, ce n'est pas possible, la loi est faite ainsi. On a demandé mais quel était le bon sens de cette loi? Et on nous a répondu c'est pour votre bien psychologique. On a dit que notre bien psychologique, c'était pas à eux de savoir ce qui était bien pour nous psychologiquement. Nous, psychologiquement, ce qui aurait été bien pour nous, c'était d'être certaines.
It's 6 years since the police unearthed the bodies of Julie and Melissa, buried in the garden of this house. What's extraordinary to me is that though Dutroux's in jail, he's never been tried for these crimes. It's as though the judicial system froze when faced with having to bring him to trial. Officially, Dutroux lived on benefits, yet this house, now derelict, was one of 5 that he owned. The bodies of 2 more missing girls were found at another. Effie Lambrechts and Anne Marchal.
I didn't believe that it was possible that children were kept in a cellar and were raped and kept there until that Dutroux was taken to prison, and that we could see the cellar. At that moment I had to believe.
Before the murders, Marc Dutroux had already been convicted of 5 charges of rape and kidnapping, yet somehow he'd served only 6 years in jail before he was released back into the Charleroi underworld. This was once Belgium's industrial heartland, but today its most famous industry is crime. Dutroux melted back into this realm of prostitution, drug traffic and stolen cars, and began to plan his next project, the kidnap of children. For the parents now burying their murdered daughters after more than a year of fruitless searching, this was not the end of their nightmare. They would soon find out that Dutroux had been a prime suspect from the start, yet nothing had been done to save their girls. Melissa's father is still asking why his daughter was allowed to die.
Une semaine après, 10 jours après l'enlèvement de Julie et Melissa, en 95, 3 témoignages disent c'est Dutroux qui enlève les enfants. On ne va pas chercher Julie et Melissa chez Dutroux. En 95, tout de suite après l'enlèvement. Ça, c'est inexplicable. Et il continue à enlever d'autres enfants. Enfin, il y a des choses qui sont... Et on met le POSA, donc le peloton spécial de surveillance, sur Dutroux, et il continue à enlever des enfants. C'est inexplicable. Tout est inexplicable, du début jusqu'à la fin.
What is known is that Dutroux was finally caught when his white van was identified. It had been used to snatch a 6th girl miles away from his home patch. The man who arrested Dutroux was Jean-Marc Connerot, an investigating magistrate. He became a national hero, uniquely respected by the parents of the murdered children.
He is someone who wants to know the truth. You can feel it. When you talk to him, you can feel that he wants to investigate, that he wants to have the truth. He is a very good magistrate.
Conrad arrested Dutroux's associates. Among the first was Jean-Michel Nihoul. Nihoul and Dutroux had been seen at the site of the latest abduction the night before. They'd been in constant phone contact the day it happened, and the next day Nihoul gave £10,000 worth of drugs to an accomplice of Dutroux. One witness claimed Nihoul had ordered a girl. Connerot knew Nihoul had influential friends. He suspected he was the brains behind a network supplying clients with children to abuse. It's a charge Nihoul denies. Connerot appealed to the public for information.
When I saw him walking down the stairs, I thought that I knew everything about him. It was a shock. I thought, finally, they stopped him.
Regina Louf was one of the first to come forward. She said that as a child she'd been abused for many years in a paedophile network involving Nihoul and Dutroux.
I remember Jean-Michel Nihoul as a very cruel man. He abused children in a very sadistic way.
She says that at the age of 12 she was taken with other children to sex parties, and, she told investigators, Dutroux was there, working for Nihoul.
Dutroux was a boy who brought drugs, cocaine and something like that to these parties, who brought some girls or watched girls on these parties. Nihoul, he was a sort of party beast. And Dutroux was more on the side.
Nihoul denies he's ever met Regina Louf, but her stories never changed. Nihoul, she said, was one of those who organised the parties and invited the cream of Belgian society, judges, politicians and influential businessmen, in order to compromise them.
It was a big business, yeah. And it was very well organized, too. There's a lot of money going on there, and a lot of blackmail also. They had a lot of parties. They filmed it even. So yes, it exists. I know it sounds crazy. And I know that there is a big taboo on everything like that. But it exists, you know.
Regina Louf's story was horrific, but her account of a violent paedophile underworld was by now reinforced by new witnesses, some of whom also named influential people. The investigation began. The witnesses' identities were protected. Each was given a code name beginning with X. Regina was X1. They went up to X9. Their testimonies became known as Belgium's X-Files. The task of trying to verify them fell to a young police investigator.
They were telling stories we haven't heard before in our lives, things we couldn't believe at the first. So we told ourselves, is this true? Could this be true? And when it is true, it's frightening that things like that could happen. We had a special room for the interviews. It was specially equipped for people who have been victimized by such matters. There was a camera in the room. They were done mostly in the evening or the early hours. When the interviews were finished, they were written down by a few people of my team, all the way from the first word to the last, literally.
But before the investigation could get underway, there was a bombshell. Jean-Marc Connerotte, the man who'd arrested Dutroux, who'd saved the imprisoned girls, was sacked from the case. His removal caused a public outcry. Belgians lost faith in their judicial system. They descended on the Palace of Justice and accused the courts of colluding with the killers. The father of one of the murdered girls spoke for all.
Il y a un juge, Connerotte, qui arrête une dizaine de personnes. On dessaisit le juge et on met un nouveau juge qui s'appelle Langlois, qui n'a jamais fait d'instruction. C'est son premier dossier d'instruction, le juge Langlois. Dans l'enquête la plus grosse, dans le dossier du siècle, on va mettre un juge qui n'a jamais fait d'instruction. Vous comprenez ça, vous?
300,000 outraged Belgians marched through Brussels in a demonstration of grief and solidarity. This white march was the largest protest the country had ever seen. Belgians felt that the dismissal of Connerotte was a betrayal of Dutroux's victims, that it signalled the end of any real search for a network. The two rescued girls were overwhelmed.
Un grand merci à tous d'être venus si nombreux. Merci. Merci aussi à tout le monde d'être venu.
The country's highest legal authorities had removed the only judge in which the public had any faith because he'd attended a fundraising dinner for the families of missing children. A conflict of interest, they called it, a lack of judgment. The government feared a revolution.
I think there were a kind of insurrection climate, a kind of pre-revolutionary climate here. You know, the big powers in Belgium, so the magistrates and the political circles, the government, the parliament, everything was totally discredited. Everything was totally discredited.
No one knew what to believe anymore. Rumour and speculation spawned a variety of wild theories.
He will instigate ultimate fear.
A feature film suggested the whole affair was part of an extreme right-wing plot to destabilise the country.
I'm very pleased, Victor. 300,000 idiots marching in Brussels. An ocean of white balloons. Magnificent. Pathetic and impressive at the same time. We really got them exactly where we want them.
En op verzoek van de Kamervoorzitter, de heer Raymond Langendries.
To appease the public's concern, Parliament set up the Dutroux-Nihul Commission.
Je propose à la Commission d'observer un moment de silence. Merci.
As the pressure grew more and more, they decided in a kind of panic climate to create the commission, because the political world had to try to find an answer.
But what the commission revealed was incompetence that beggared belief. Police had been told of Dutroux's plans to make money by kidnapping children. They had his house under surveillance throughout the abductions. They even searched inside and heard the sound of children, but failed to find the dungeon. What it established beyond doubt was that the girls could have been saved.
On avait tous les éléments pour arrêter Dutroux. C'est ça qui est le scandale de cette affaire, c'est que Dutroux était connu, il avait des antécédents, on avait des informations sensibles sur le fait qu'il avait aménagé dans ses caves une cache pour y accueillir des enfants, il y avait des informations au niveau de Charleroi attestant que les enfants pouvaient être chez lui.
But when the Parliamentary Commission began to ask why, was it incompetence or had someone in authority protected Dutroux, cooperation with their investigation stopped.
Ils ont été complètement sabotés, au point qu'ils ont dû voter eux-mêmes au Parlement, ils ont voté l'enfermement de tout le travail qu'ils avaient fait aux archives pour 30 ans. Tout le travail qu'ils ont fait est enfermé et on ne peut plus avoir accès pendant 30 ans. Et c'est le Parlement lui-même qui a voté ça. Enfin, vous imaginez, quoi.
If the Commission's job had been to restore stability, to clear the air of insurrection, it worked. The danger to Belgium's establishment was over. But there was still no answer to the most important question. Was the catalogue of failures pure incompetence, or had Dutroux and his friends enjoyed protection? Were they protected?
Sur le volet des protections, nous n'avons pas découvert grand-chose, si ce n'est que la meilleure protection dont Dutroux a pu avoir le bénéfice, finalement, le mauvais fonctionnement du système policier et judiciaire en Belgique.
But Jean-Michel Nihul, the man suspected of hiring Dutroux to kidnap children, was released from jail after just 5 months. It's still unclear if he'll ever come to trial, and some members of the Commission remain convinced he is protected.
We succeeded in demonstrating that Nihul was really an artist in protection, really a specialized man in manipulating inquiries, policemen and judges. We had proofs about that.
Nihul's release just left more unanswered questions for the families. The mother of Melissa, Karine Rousseau, has access to the legal evidence the court will bring against Dutroux. She's found no answers, nothing to clarify who stole, raped and killed her daughter. All charges Dutroux denies.
Oui, allô? Oui. Depuis 5 ans, on n'a toujours pas réussi ni à obtenir des aveux de Dutroux, ni à obtenir des traces matérielles ou des témoignages probants qui attestent que c'est Dutroux qui a vraiment enlevé les enfants, qui les a vraiment violés ou qui les a vraiment assassinés.
C'est assez catastrophique parce que plus rien n'est clair aujourd'hui. Plus rien n'est clair.
The parents suspect Dutroux was not acting alone, that others were involved in abducting and hiding the girls. When he was briefly imprisoned for car theft in November 1995, Dutroux claims to have left the girls in his cellar, in this specially constructed cage with a little food and water. On his release, after nearly 4 months, Dutroux claims he found the children barely alive, that he tried to save them, but they died in his arms. But for the Rousseaus, this story can't be true.
Les 4 mois d'enfermement de 2 petites filles de 8 ans dans une cave en plein hiver. Mais quand je dis dans une cave, c'est une cache qui est construite à l'intérieur d'une cave. Donc je veux dire, elle fait 3 mètres sur 2, cette cache, elle est toute petite. Il n'y a pas de fenêtre, je veux dire, c'est tout noir.
On a coupé l'électricité, il n'y a pas de chauffage pendant 15 jours.
On est en plein hiver et elles n'ont pas de nourriture. On ne tient pas pendant 4 mois, puisque lui dit que quand il sort de prison 4 mois plus tard, elles sont toujours vivantes. Mais enfin bon, c'est un exploit inhumain, surhumain. On ne peut pas imaginer 2 enfants de 8 ans tenir seuls, sans avoir rien pour les soutenir, ni du point de vue alimentaire, ni du point de vue chauffage, ni du point de vue humain. Psychologique, rien du tout.
Ils n'ont pas eu
dans une toute petite cache comme ça, pendant autant de temps, et survivre.
So how did they survive so long? Did someone else keep them alive? The Palace of Justice in Liège is the seat of one of Belgium's most powerful figures, Prosecutor General Anne Tilly, who's in charge of the case. She says there's no evidence to contradict Dutroux's version of how the children died. So how did the children survive so long, nearly 4 months, until Dutroux was released from prison?
Non, mais Julie était morte. Hein. Julie était morte. Mélissa était au bord de la mort puisqu'elle est morte, je crois que c'est le lendemain.
But Melissa, how could she have survived nearly 4 months?
Survivre dans quelles conditions? Survivre dans quelles conditions? Dans un état lamentable puisqu'elle ne savait même plus se soulever. Ni du trou, évidemment, personne d'autre que lui n'était là.
Dutroux was acting alone. This is the mantra repeated again and again in Belgium, with a certitude that for the victims' parents is inexplicable. They believe that investigators have blocked every lead, rejected every clue which would reveal that Dutroux was kidnapping girls for someone else. Most painful, perhaps, is the autopsy report which shows Melissa had been repeatedly raped about 2 weeks before her death, while Dutroux was in jail. So who raped this child? Dutroux denies he raped the girls. But isn't it simple to find out if Dutroux raped them or someone else, scientifically?
Normalement, oui. En principe, oui. Mais les moyens, enfin les analyses scientifiques élémentaires comme recherche d'ADN, je ne sais pas moi, de traces de traces d'auteur, par exemple, sur les corps des enfants, n'ont pas été faites.
Back in the Palace of Justice, they say the DNA tests were done, but the results were inconclusive. Can you explain why there was no DNA analysis done?
Si les analyses d'ADN ont été faites, madame.
And the results?
Rien du tout.
What does that mean, that there was no trace of sperm?
Elles étaient dans un état de putréfaction qui ne permettait pas de faire des analyses de ce genre-là, de sperme ni rien du tout.
That's not what's written in the autopsy report. Again, the story doesn't square. The bodies weren't severely decomposed. DNA can be identified from samples taken long after death. The question remains unanswered. Why is there no DNA result? Might it have shown that someone else had raped Melissa? Other forensic tests that should have been routine were just not done. Human hairs collected from Dutroux's dungeon weren't sent for analysis. The logic was strange. They claimed that as there was no evidence anyone else had entered the cage, there was no need to analyse the hair. In 5 years, Connerott's successor has shed no light on the abduction, imprisonment or death of the girls. Jacques Langlois refused to be interviewed.
Langlois don't believe in a sort of network. For Langlois, Dutroux is the only one who used the girls. For Langlois, it's simple. There's one raper, Dutroux, and closed case.
By the spring of 1997, Evidence of a paedophile network linked to the Dutroux affair was emerging from the testimony of the ex-witnesses. Regina Louf had provided investigators with details of her childhood abuse, which they'd begun to check.
In one of her testimonies, she explained how a certain person had been murdered in a certain place. So we went to look for that case, that old case. She described it, where it happened, more or less.
I remember it like it's a film in my head. I can close my eyes and see every little detail of that house where she was murdered.
Regina Louf described a house where in 1984 she said she saw the torture and murder of a young girl. The house was connected to an underground mushroom farm. The building has since been demolished, but Rudy Hoskin's team identified it and matched Regina's story to an unsolved murder, that of 15-year-old Christine Van Hees.
She gave us some details that made us think it's impossible to give without having been there at that place, or without having lived that, in the way the body was found at that time, and the way she described the person was killed. There were some things that were similar.
It was a sort of bondage, so her legs and her hands and her throat were connected with the same rope, and when she moved, she strangled herself, yeah.
The credibility of Regina Louf's testimony hinged partly on whether she really knew the house where Christine Van Hees was killed. This man grew up there, though his family sold it before the murder. It was two houses knocked into one, with a unique passage of stairs and corridors. No one, he says, could describe it unless they'd been there.
Il y avait le couloir ici, entre les deux. Elle a fait un dessin des clinches de porte. C'était des vieilles portes. Elle a dessiné le stuc. Elle a décrit le papier. Elle a décrit le pavement. Je ne sais pas comment on peut décrire ça tellement fidèlement quand on est jamais rentré dans une maison. Je ne connais pas Regina Louf, hein. Moi, je ne l'ai jamais vue, moi. Hein. Je n'ai jamais été confronté avec elle. Moi, j'ai simplement eu sa déclaration sur l'état de lieu de la maison, de la charbonnière. Et là-dessus, mon frère et moi, on a dit, c'est sûr et certain qu'elle est rentrée dans la charbonnière. C'est sûr et certain.
The police were now convinced they were onto something, that Regina Louf's testimony was credible. What's more, it gave them a new link between Marc Dutroux and the man accused of being his boss, Jean-Michel Nihoul. In the year before her death, Christine Van Hees was a regular visitor to the Brussels ice rink, where Marc Dutroux also went. He'd already been banned from the rink in Charleroi, where he was notorious for molesting girls. The manager remembers it well.
Et là, si vous voulez, c'est là que j'ai vu à ce moment-là une jeune fille qui était contre la balustrade, qui s'est éclatée, et donc Dutroux qui était en face et qui faisait des gestes, mettait ses mains. Donc je l'ai pris, quoi, je l'ai reculé, je l'ai porté ici dans. Et il y a à ce moment-là mon beau-père qui est arrivé et il s'est fait expliquer l'affaire et puis il voulait donc le frapper. Bon, moi j'ai retenu justement son bras juste à temps, quoi, parce que sinon il voulait le frapper.
When she wasn't skating, Christine Van Hees used to spend time in the building of a pirate radio station. It belonged to Jean-Michel Nihoul. Both men, Dutroux and Nihoul, were at Christine Van Hees's murder, according to Regina Louf. And Dutroux was involved in the murder?
He watched it, and he didn't do anything, and so he abused her that night. So, yes, he was involved.
How many people were there?
I still don't know for sure, but around 8.
Nihoul, Dutroux,
and a lot of others. So But everybody, except Dutroux, is free.
Nihul denied it, but her testimony was dynamite. If true, it meant Dutroux and Nihul were linked with another murder. But then out of the blue, the investigation was stopped.
We received a message that we couldn't investigate anymore, just like that. We were sent home. Just like that. Without an explanation. Because our work hasn't been done all right. Very strange.
Why were you taken off this case?
I wish I knew. Perhaps we were touching something we couldn't touch. Some people say this, we didn't have to prove at that moment to say things like that. But perhaps we were coming closer to some things, yeah, perhaps.
Like what things?
I don't know, something Belgium or the world shouldn't know about.
Patrick de Batz, the head of Hosken's team, had been one of Belgium's most respected police investigators. It was he who'd taken Regina's testimony. Now he too was sent home, accused of manipulating her evidence.
Patrick de Batz, who questioned her, was accused of planting some of the information so that she would reproduce it. You watched that investigation. Was that true?
No, no way. No way. But we even had some magistrates, judges and superior gendarmerie officers watching how we interviewed, and they watched it from the first to the last moment. And if we haven't done it right at that time, they should have said us, don't work that way, but they didn't tell us anything.
For de Batz and his colleagues, charged with manipulating an inquiry, a Kafkaesque battle now began to clear their names. They were suspended, and Regina Louf got a call from a member of the new team assigned in their place. His motive was clear.
He said, well, we have to search for mistakes you made now. And you have to prove now that you are right. And I said, no, I don't have to prove that I'm right. You have to investigate if I'm right or not. I'm not a police officer. I can do house search and I can't interrogate my abusers. You have to do that. I just can tell my story and make testimony. That's all I can do. And said, wrong. You have to prove it.
News about Regina's story began to leak out. When the media took it up, it was to destroy her.
X1 et ses fantasmes, une enquête au-delà du réel. Madame, Monsieur, bonsoir. L'affaire Dutroux s'est enrichie de...
The flagship programme of the government-funded French language channel was unequivocal. De Batz was guilty, they declared, and Regina Louf a sinister and deranged liar.
Regina Louf est une mythomane, c'est mon avis. C'est une dame qui a inventé je dirais des scénarios qui ne tiennent pas la route. Et tout cela a été démontré comme étant une sorte de fiction. Donc,
well, no, not according to the investigators who were sacked. They don't agree with you. They say they weren't even allowed to investigate, that they were stopped.
C'est inexact. Je persiste à croire que ces gens n'ont pas fait leur travail correctement et qu'ils ont laissé croire à l'opinion publique que ce que disait Regina Louf ou d'autres témoins anonymes était partiellement vrai. Tout ça est un tissu de fiction, ce sont des affabulations de type pornographique, ça n'a aucun sens.
Weren't you manipulated? I mean, people have said she was completely mad, she invented the whole thing.
Well, some people, yeah, some people say this, but they weren't there. We lived all the testimonies. We've seen them, we did the investigations, so for ourselves we know what should have been right or what could have been wrong. But when you haven't lived it, when you haven't seen everything, you can't give an opinion on this. It's impossible. But we found some things that should have been investigated more.
I'm married for 13 years. I have 4 children. I live a normal life. I have a business of my own. So I'm not crazy. We are labeled as crazy. We have a stigma. We are stigmatized as crazy persons because we had the courage to talk about things that happened in our past with persons who played a role in the Belgian economy or politics or something like that. It was easier to make us crazy than to believe us.
Despite its earlier investigating zeal, Belgium's parliament now stood by as Regina Louf's testimony was declared worthless. The judiciary announced it would not be used in any trial. And that might have been the end of it, had the files of the entire Dutroux investigation not been leaked. Marie-Jeanne van Heeswijk and 2 other investigative journalists had access to every witness statement, every police report in the Dutroux affair. Their book on Belgium's X-Files shook the country. How did you get the information for the book?
We had the opportunity to see the whole police file on the affair, and the problem is that we wanted to be sure that there was no manipulation behind that, because it's always possible. So we decided to meet a lot of people who were named in the files, who were witnesses in the file, and we met those people without saying that what we knew already, and we listened to their story.
They found the new team had rewritten Regina Louf's original statements. Testimony had been changed.
We began to check it, and we began to read again all the questioning of Regina Louf to see how they did that, they rewrite that. And one by one, we discovered that gendarmes, colleagues of the BATS, had pretended that the BATS manipulated the investigation. So everybody was tricked.
To this day, no evidence has ever been produced to support the allegations against de Bats. Yet he continues to be accused. Investigation into Regina's story is dead. And yet 2 separate inquiries cleared them of every charge that they manipulated her testimony.
The inquiry. Yes, I'll show you the final report of the inquiry of the gendarmerie. It was made 26 June 2000.
So what does this mean?
I'm not a bad policeman.
But now that's cleared you, you face new charges, new allegations, new accusations against you.
I'm not afraid of that, because I know the conclusions will be the same.
But why this constant barrage of accusations?
I don't know. I can imagination things, but I can't explain them.
For 6 years, the parents of the murdered girls have grappled with the inexplicable. Why were their daughters left to die? Why has Dutroux never come to trial? And why has every lead that might have revealed a network behind Dutroux been blocked or ignored? But Belgium's lost interest in their struggle. Today, anyone who talks of a network, even the parents, is dismissed as deranged.
I talked in press about children who were raped and so on. And they started again with saying that I'm a little bit foolish and that I'm fantasizing. I'm sure that in several years everyone will believe that networks will exist. Then they have to accept.
Since Marc Dutroux's arrest, anyone who's questioned the official line has been attacked. Every lead that might have widened the net has hit the buffers. Dutroux, meanwhile, has sat in jail. But outside, in the shadowy circles in which he moved, potential witnesses in the Dutroux affair have died in strange ways. A police informer with links to the Charleroi underworld, José Stepp, told a journalist he had explosive information on Dutroux. 2 days before they were due to meet, He died. His family believes he was poisoned. Jean-Paul Taminot was up to his neck in the Charleroi underworld of stolen cars and prostitution. He was summoned to see the Charleroi police and disappeared. The day of Dutroux's arrest, his foot was fished out of the canal.
It's quite a coincidence that they died just before they want to testify, you know? That's strange.
Social worker Gina Pardons worked with abused children. She'd identified the paedophile members of a pornography ring who'd threatened her. When she reported the threats to the police, she was killed in an unexplained car crash. Francois Raiskens told a friend he'd seen one of the missing girls, Melissa, alive in Holland. Before he could tell the police, his body was found crushed on the railway line. Some 20 people, all potential witnesses in the Dutroux affair, have died in mysterious circumstances.
I survived it all. I don't know why, but I survived my abuses, I survived my testimony just because I said it all. Why kill me now, you know? I'm mad.
An uneasy peace has returned to Belgium. The streets are calm. The danger of insurrection has passed. The paedophile networks persist. Sometimes there are even arrests. Earlier this year, 19 men from one village were charged with child rape. But the Dutroux affair has paralysed Belgium's judiciary. After 6 years in jail, there is still no date for his trial. When it comes, it'll satisfy no one.
The trial of Dutroux, it will be a theatre, a circus. And I don't want to be part of a circus. The truth is that there is a network and that they have to search for that network so that you can save other children in the future.
Ici dans ce pays pour ne jamais arriver à une vérité parce que il y a trop de vérité à faire sortir ici en fait. Moi, je suis certaine que les gens ont envie de comprendre et sont capables de comprendre beaucoup plus que ce que la justice et le politique ne veulent bien leur donner à voir. On infantilise énormément les gens.
I did what I could do. I testified. I spoke up to the police, to the judges. I spoke up to the press. You know, I yelled it out. But what can I do anymore now? I can't.
Children continue to go missing in Belgium. Dutroux's arrest has made no difference. Last year it was more than 2,000. 52 of those cases remain unsolved.